Welcome to On My Way to Wealth, the podcast where busy Gen Xers can learn financial tips as they navigate life on their way to wealth. And now, please join your host, Luis Rosa.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of On My Way to Wealth. My name is Luis, and I'm your host. This is a Hispanic Heritage Month special edition episode. Hispanic Heritage Month takes place from September 15th to October 15th every year as a time to recognize, celebrate, and remember the contributions, culture, and extensive histories of the American Latino community. It first began in 1968 as Hispanic Heritage Week and later on became Hispanic Heritage Month in 1988. Since then, the month has been celebrated nationwide through festivals, art shows, conferences, community gatherings, and much more. The reason it starts on September 15th is because it celebrates the independence days of several Latin American countries, including Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua on September 15th, Lindo, Mexico on September 16th, and Chile on September 18th. It also includes holidays that recognize Hispanic contributions, such as Virgin Islands Puerto Rico Friendship Day, which is celebrated in the U.S. Virgin Islands on the second Monday in October. For this month, I'd like to highlight individuals who have made a great contribution in their chosen profession and the community at large. So now I'd like to introduce you to our very special guest, Carlos Hernandez. Let me tell you a little bit about him, and then we're going to let him talk about his background. Carlos is the founder and CEO of Crediverso. He's a Los Angeles native, the grandson and son of Hispanic immigrants, and grew up not only listening to stories, but seeing firsthand how the U.S. financial system affected the Hispanic immigrant experience. Carlos has always been keenly aware that this system was not designed for the Spanish-speaking or Hispanic community, even though these individuals represent 20% of the U.S. population. By doing deeper research, he realized that across every financial product vertical available, from credit cards and loans to bank accounts and insurance, the adoption rates in the Hispanic community were far lower than those of the general market. Carlos launched Crediverso as a result to fix this and is on a mission to help the U.S. Hispanic community realize their American dream by achieving financial access and freedom. Carlos is a you heard that right, three-time graduate from Harvard University, undergrad, law school, and business school. He's a registered attorney with the American Bar Association in California and a licensed real estate broker with the California Bureau of Real Estate. Before launching Crediverso, he served as director of Latin America and the Caribbean for MGM Resorts International. And without further ado, bienvenido, Carlos. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Wow, what an intro. Makes me sound
what a bio, man. I'm like, what's next, man? Governor, president?
Oh, I don't know about. Yeah, I'm just happy to be here. It's nice to chat with you. I've loved this podcast, so it's really great to be here and talk with you today.
Thank you. Likewise, man. I'm a big fan from afar. I'm just glad that something like Crediverso exists. You know, we're going to get into everything that is available for the community there. But before we do so, man, I would love to hear a little bit more about your trajectory, you know, upbringing and your money memories as a result of that upbringing, and then eventually what led you to create Crediverso.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, I had a pretty typical upbringing. Grew up in Los Angeles, as you said. I was born into a Mexican-American family. My mother grew up in Mexico and mostly Tijuana. Dad grew up in East LA. He was son of a cop. As you said, you know, when you're in a community like that, you see stories from immigrants really left and right. And so we were kind of back and forth between the U.S. and Mexico a lot when I was a kid. We were mostly based in Los Angeles, but we moved to Miami for a little bit. We moved to in and out of Mexico City. I was almost born in Mexico City. And throughout that process, you really start to get an appreciation for all of the challenges that come with living between two countries, from moving one country to another. And you just see friends and family members all dealing with those challenges. And so, you know, I can't tell you how many stories I saw of people. Someone would, you know, maybe they're a doctor or a lawyer. And this, by the way, this isn't unique to Mexico or to any of the countries in Latin America. This is just something that is across the immigrant experience as a whole. And so somebody can be a professional in their own country and have a perfect credit score, and then they move to the States, and all of a sudden they don't have a credit score anymore, and they can't get a loan, they can't get a credit card, and you know, maybe they come to this country and they don't speak a language, and all of the information about how to do that is all in English, and all of a sudden they can't get access to that information anymore. And so it's really challenging, I think, to do that. And I have so much respect for people who have lifted up their families and left their roots and come to another country to try and pursue the American dream, or whatever dream it is is that they have in their hearts. And seeing all of that growing up, seeing it in family and friends really inspired me to want to do something about it. And so I grew up in Los Angeles, but have spent a lot of time working in New York. I've done some work in Mexico. When I was at the previous job you just mentioned, I was doing work all across Latin America. And it has all kind of led me to this, to wanting to build something for the community that helped create more access for immigrants and people who really didn't have the same level of opportunity as is given to those who are born in the U.S.
Yeah, and you bring a great point about the immigrant experience in general. I remember I'm one of six siblings, and two of my sisters came later. We came here in the early 90s, my parents in the 80s, and we followed a few years later. And my two older sisters were not able to come at the same time as the rest of us because they were already over 18, and they had to basically do their own process of immigration. But something you said just reminded me of their trajectory. One of them was a dentist with her own practice. The other one was a lawyer. And when they came here, like all of that was null and void. They needed, they just couldn't just apply to become a lawyer and a dentist here. They would have had to go through again, like law school and medical school, and their degrees weren't really valid, right? So you see that story a lot of times, because you spoke about, admiring some of those people that just basically leave everything behind. And they come here. They might have had a well-established situation back home where there was perfect credit or careers, and then they come here and start from scratch. So growing up in New York City, I remember there were Dominican doctors that would drive in a cab just to be able to survive and send money back home because they just couldn't become doctors right away here. So that is definitely something to admire in a lot of people that come from other countries here, and then they have to not only learn a new language but also learn the financial system, which is where tools like the platforms like Crediverso help, right? So I'm glad that you thought of it and you put in so much effort behind it.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I saw a very, very small version of it just being a lawyer in California, right? If I want to practice in New York, I have to go take the bar again in New York. And that's a 3-day test. It's not fun. You got to study for it a ton or you're probably going to fail. And that is a very, very small version of what that looks like. But, if you want to do it, you do it because the opportunities are better and the life that you can give to your family, to your children is better in that other place. And so I just have so much respect for people who do that because, you mentioned the dentist in your family, right? I think you said it was your sister. It's not as if becoming a doctor or dentist is quick either. It takes years and years. And so you do it once, you're not going to want to do it again. It just makes it so hard. So it's something really that is worth admiring. And when you do see those disparate levels of access to resources that are afforded to those who are recent immigrants to the country, to the extent that you can do something to help, I think we have a responsibility to, and that's really why we started this company.
Yeah, no, for sure. Can you tell me some of the money memories that you had earlier on, like as you saw your parents and your grandparents work here within the U.S.?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'll tell you one. I'll tell you a couple. So the one that stuck with me from when I was a little kid, this wasn't anybody in my family. It was a family friend. We were sitting in their kitchen once. I think they'd invited us over. We were having dinner, and they had all these envelopes all over the table. And I asked them what the envelopes were for, and they said, "Oh, well, this envelope is for college tuition. This envelope is for Christmas presents. This envelope is for, a new car, whatever." And that was their system of budgeting. That was their system of organizing money. And so that money, that stayed in envelopes. It didn't go into a bank account. It wasn't FDIC insured. It wasn't safe in a bank somewhere. It wasn't earning any interest on it, either as a checking account or a savings account. It was just sitting in an envelope in, I'm assuming, a kitchen drawer somewhere. I saw it on the kitchen table. And that memory really stuck with me. And I found out later, by the way, that that's a very common system for folks who aren't familiar with the banking system. They maybe have some innate fear of the financial system here in the U.S. It's very common to use. They call it the envelope system. And that inspired a lot of what we wanted to do because, just take those two examples, right? Don't know how the banking system works or you're afraid of the banking system. Right. I think one of the biggest challenges that we faced is getting that information to folks who don't have access to it, right? If you don't know how to open up a bank account, if you don't know how to establish your credit score, you're not going to do it. And so crossing that threshold of communicating that information is a very challenging first step. Then you've got the second one, which is fear. And that is something, it's not something that I personally experienced because I grew up here in the States, but it's something that I very much understand. When you go to some of these countries abroad, and it can be anywhere, if there is a less than 100% secure economic or political situation, you're not going to trust the banks, right? If you don't know what government's going to be in power, or if you don't know if your inflation is going to go up to 30% next year, or if you don't know if there's going to be around the bank, you're not going to put your money in a bank. You're going to stick it under your mattress because it honestly is probably a lot safer there. That's not the system that we have in the US, but that doesn't mean that you don't bring those lived experiences of fear and mistrust of the system with you when you come to the US. And so I can very much understand how people arrive to a point where they think that storing your money in envelopes is the best way to budget. And a big part of the work we do is to try to show folks that there is a better way to the system that they're doing. And the better way when I say better, it can actually mean real dollars, more money in your pocket.
Yeah. And that fear is very real because like you mentioned, the political environment can affect the security of certain things like money in the bank, or even just the economic environment, right? Inflation can shoot up, as we've seen in some Latin American countries as well, to the point where your money is just not worth much, right? So a lot of people do bring that mentality. And I remember that. My parents and grandparents too, they went for a very long time without ever having a bank account. And it was just like that, right? That envelope system, or a can of coffee here with this, this particular stash. I do remember they didn't even use the credit system either. Like the closest thing to it was layaway, where I remember, like, if my parents wanted to buy a couch, they would go to the furniture store and they would put a down payment on it. And then they continued to make payments on it. And then when it was paid off, then you got the couch, as opposed to like just charging it on a card and paying interest. So I guess maybe that was a positive in some way because people weren't like putting themselves into debt. But it's very interesting because like my parents didn't get credit cards until we got older, and then show them how the system works and how they can just take certain things to their advantage, right? For convenience purposes, they used to go to the check cashing place and just cash the check and then use that cash to pay bills, ended up paying a ton of fees as a result. And also sending money back home, just paying the fees back in the day using those, agencies that let you, now you can do it on an app, I guess, right? But all those fees really added up.
Yeah. Even on an app, you still pay fees big time. That's, right. I mean, we can get into kind of some of the work that we do, but that's one of the big things that we've tried to solve for is people getting saddled with those big fees because, a big part of the reason why folks immigrate in the first place is better economic opportunity. Maybe they can get a job, a higher paying job in that other country. And why they want to do it is so that they can support their family back home. And so, you mentioned that your parents moved here in the 80s, right? And you had your siblings back in the DR. I'm sure that for a while they were probably sending money back to support you guys, and they were probably using Western Union or Money Transfer, one of these companies, to send that money back. And those are all great companies. They do a really great service, and it's a very challenging business to be in. But the result oftentimes of how challenging that business is that there are just really high fees associated with those services. And again, there is very limited access to information about what those fees are, how transparent they are, what goes into it, and what the guy down the street is charging compared to what you're paying. So it's oftentimes just part of the process where you just pay what you see because that's the only thing that that is available to you. And so one of the things that we've tried to do is create a system where we let people compare the different prices that different money transfer providers are charging so that they don't have to pay those really high prices every time. Because if you're sending half your paycheck back every 2 weeks, the last thing you want to do is lose a big part of that money to just fees that you don't really need to be paying.
Yeah, great point. Absolutely. Yeah, so let's get into Crediverso itself. Tell us how do we access it, and what are some of the tools that we can access within it?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing that we start with is just education. And so we call it the Learning Center. And as far as I know, it is the largest repository of English and Spanish language financial information available on the web. And so we have tons and tons of blogs. We have guides, educational information, a glossary between Spanish and English financial terminology, all available just so that we can start to communicate out the information of how do I improve my credit score? How do I access a bank account if I don't have documentation? How do I do all these things that aren't challenges for the general market here in the US, general market consumer, because they didn't have that challenge of being an immigrant themselves. And so that's really where we began. And I think the core of the mission of the company is to try to provide resources to the underserved. And one of the interesting things that's happened recently is that we started this company with a focus on underserved immigrants within the Hispanic community. And as we've grown, as we've become a bigger company and begun to offer more services and more products, we've realized that, not surprisingly, but we've realized that there are many more underserved communities out there beyond just recent immigrants, beyond the Hispanic community even, that also need help and increased access to the resources that we as American citizens just take for granted. And so one of the things that we've really become proud of is this product that we just launched. It's called My Pocket Lawyer. And the idea behind My Pocket Lawyer is that, Luis is a small business owner. I think you would definitely appreciate this, but you are, whether it's as a small business owner, an entrepreneur, an individual consumer, every day you are confronted with legal challenges. And that can be anything as simple as trying to hire somebody, as negotiating a lease contract, more complicated stuff like wills and immigration issues. And right now, the options that are available to most people are you can either go try to Google it and get an answer, and you're probably not going to find an answer that's perfectly suited to the problem that you have, because this just by their very nature, this type of problem is very complex. Or B, you can go pay a lawyer. And, with the average lawyer costing anywhere from $200 to $500 an hour, depending on the type of the issue and the state that you're located in, that is a solution that is out of reach for many, many people. In fact, it's honestly a luxury. Layer that on top of the fact that you have what are called legal deserts in the country, where I think 40% of the counties in the country just don't have access to lawyers, period. A legal desert comes from the term food desert. I think you've heard that term, access to groceries. A legal desert is somewhere where there is one or fewer lawyers per 1,000 people in 40% of the country. And that's, by the way, more in ethnic counties and neighborhoods, is without access to lawyers. And so My Pocket Lawyer was designed as a tool to help increase access to this type of information, increase access to legal resources for people who don't have access. And again, that's anybody who is underserved, who's under-resourced. It's not just people who are within the Hispanic or the immigrant community. It really can be anybody. I even use it as we're navigating some of the legal challenges around running a startup company. And the way the tool works is if you have any sort of contract, that can be a lease agreement, it can be a job offer that you just got, employment contract, it can be anything. You upload it, or you can even take a picture of it, honestly, if it's short enough, and you get a simplified, summarized explanation of what the agreement is. We call out any areas that you want to look for, anything that might be problematic, and then you can ask any questions. And so, if you have a lease agreement for your business and you're unsure who pays utilities, or you don't know if you're going to get your security deposit back, you ask this system, and it's a really marvelous piece of engineering that our engineers put together that's using AI technology and large language model technology, and it will give you those answers. It'll comb through the document, it'll tell you how to do it, and it basically puts you in the position of being able to be your own lawyer. I think the goal is that we want to remove the need to go to a lawyer in 50% of cases, because honestly, most of those cases that people have, they either don't know that they're supposed to go to a lawyer, or they know that they should go to one, but it's just too expensive. And so that's what the tool is designed to do.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I didn't know that statistics. I didn't even know there was such a thing as a desert for an attorney desert. Definitely, I've heard of the food desert, but that is very high statistic. That's amazing. I mean, it sounds like an amazing tool. Where do you see this going, like in the future, as it develops and more people use it? Do you think at some point would there be a human component to it? Like if people have questions that maybe they're not clear on and stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think our goal is to try to put you in a position of where we've democratized access to legal resources for you, and that can mean a lot of things. I think there's what's known as a justice gap, and a justice gap it really has two dimensions. It's a knowledge gap and it's a services gap, and it's that's the gap between people who have access to justice and law and legal resources and those who don't. And so, knowledge gap is that really means that in many of these cases, people who experience a civil legal problem, which is, I think, something like 55% of households in any given year. And by the way, it's about 70% in below median income households. They don't seek legal assistance because they don't know that it's a legal issue. And then there's a services gap also, and that's that it's a legal issue, but you either decide to deal with the problem without help because you're worried about cost, you don't know where to look, you're maybe afraid to pursue legal action, and all of those scenarios are ones that we are trying to address with this product. There are different approaches for each of them, and our goal is to carry you as far as we can in understanding your legal situation, the legal resources available to you, making sense of complicated legalese in a contract without having to go to a lawyer. Now, obviously, for many cases, there is going to come a point where with an online tool, you can't solve the problem anymore. And in those cases, we are building out services that will help you get in touch with the right lawyer and evaluate who the right lawyer is for you and kind of just guide you through the process. Again, this is something that, as I'm an attorney, so I've had experience in reaching out to other attorneys, and I know what to look for, and I know how to evaluate whether somebody has experience in the practice area in which my issue falls. But again, you think about someone who hasn't had to do this before, who maybe has never had to go to a lawyer, never talked to a lawyer, is afraid of lawyers. Many people just don't even like lawyers, which as a lawyer, I can totally understand. It can be challenging. And so part of the goal here is not only just to put you in a position where you can understand things on your own, but also to help connect you with the right attorney for when the time comes that you do need them.
Yeah, and it sounds like a very useful tool, because I would imagine as the attorney receiving the inquiry, you would be better prepped because you would have some background as to what it is this person was originally searching for and the answers that the pocket lawyer basically spit out, right? So you have more detail to be able to help that person quicker.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, if we can send information to these attorneys that really communicates, hey, this is the legal issue, here's the case precedent that applies, it puts them in a position to be able to evaluate it much more efficiently. And more importantly than I think the benefit to the lawyers, the benefit to the consumer. So I mentioned earlier that lawyers can cost $200, $500 an hour. They can be more expensive in many cases. So if you can do away with the initial 30 minutes that it takes for them to just read through what your contract says and understand what the issue is, we've already saved you a lot of money. And I think that's really important when you evaluate this, when you recognize the fact that spending money like that is a luxury for many people. That's not something that people have budgeted for. I mean, you spend a lot of time in your program talking about how you budget for emergency costs and just the cost of daily life. Throwing in a few $100s for a legal issue that you didn't expect is generally not anticipated. And so if we can help save costs there, that's really something that we're proud of.
Yeah, definitely. I love the overall focus on education as well. I think that helps consumers make an informed decision as opposed to just having to trust whatever they found online or a professional, right? So it's always good to do your own research, and it's great to have like a hub like you're having, like the glossary, and especially having it in English and Spanish is amazing. What are some of the other features? You mentioned some credit card comparison tools and things like that.
Yes, this is funny. You asked earlier what some of my money memories were, and one of them that sticks with me and is a big part of the reason why we started Crediverso initially was I had an aunt who she lived in Mexico and was moving to the States. She reached out and said, "Hey, I'm coming to the States." She had been back and forth between the States for a while, and so she actually did have a credit score, but she wanted my recommendation on what the best credit card was. And I thought, okay, this is easy. I've done this before for myself. I know how to pick out a credit card for the best travel card or the best rewards card, the best gas card, whatever. Let me just go send her a couple articles. I don't really want to have to deal with this, and then I'll just send her some articles and I'll be done with it. She only spoke Spanish, really, and so I went to go try and find some of these articles for her in Spanish, and they just didn't exist. And I was amazed that, you've got 20% of the population it comes from a Hispanic background in the U.S. Many of those speak Spanish only, and there just aren't resources available for them. And so we built out a lot of stuff. We actually were the first company to launch a credit check in Spanish in the U.S., if you can believe that. It didn't exist until about 2021 when we launched one. And we built out this whole library of information about what the best credit cards are, what the best loans are. And again, the whole goal here was that these are areas where now you're talking real money, right? You're talking interest rates, you're talking fees, annual fees, minimum balance fees, all sorts of stuff like that. And so these are the types of decisions that can have a real impact on the community. And this is something that we felt very strongly needed to be made available to a broader portion of the population. So we built out essentially a credit card and loan recommendation engine, and it's essentially just lots of information, right? And we try to make it available in a simple way. It's something that has existed for a long time in the general market, and in line with our mission of increasing access to financial legal information for anybody who doesn't have access to those resources. That's just something that we wanted to put out there.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating to me because like now as a financial planner, I'm more in tune with getting the best terms for things, right? I do a lot of that work with my clients in terms of helping them, look for mortgages and loans or just alternatives to reaching a goal, right? And as a consumer, to me, the best credit card was whatever I can get approved for. I was just excited to get a credit card in the first place. Never even dawned on me, right, that there are different types of cards that can benefit based on your lifestyle or things that you spend the most money on, whether it's travel, or there are business credit cards out there. And you have to take a look at the annual fees, what perks are included, any cash back, and so on, right? Because you can use those to your benefit. And so, it just never dawned on me before. And I think a lot of people might be in the same boat where they just never realized like that looking at the different types of cards is a thing that you should actually do it, not just be like, I'm just going to apply and be happy to get one, right?
Yeah, and it can get complicated really fast. So, I don't blame people for not wanting to go through that whole process. And I've been in the position as a lawyer within the family, right? People are always coming to you and saying, hey, can you read this for me? Can you tell me what this means? And so a big part of the reason why we built this thing was just because I'm lazy and I want to get out of having to do all that work for family members, right? But you look at these really long credit card contracts and their terms and conditions, they're in font size 5.5 maybe. And there's really important stuff in there. There's your APR, there are fees all hidden in there, and nobody wants to read that. What I've started doing is when people say, hey, can you help me understand whether this credit card is good, rather than go through it all myself and say, okay, here's what I think you need to look out for. This is why this is a good credit card. This is why this is a bad credit card. These are the type of points you're going to get. You're going to get points for gas, or you're going to get points for groceries. You're not going to get points for restaurants. I just take the thing, I upload it to my Pocket Lawyer, and I say, okay, go ask whatever question you want. And they can say, okay, what's my interest rate? What is my interest rate if I do X, Y, Z? And it just answers it for you. So it's almost like I said, we created it because I'm lazy and I don't have to answer these questions myself. Now we're putting people in the position to be able to ask the questions themselves and get an answer as if they were talking to a lawyer.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, we're going to put links in the show notes for everyone that wants to access. But for those listening for now, where will be the place, the website, or the app that they should visit?
So if they want to check out our new product, it's mypocketlawyer.ai. And then our parent company is crediverso.com.
Got it. Perfect. Yeah, I'll put those in the show notes. So I wanted to go back because I didn't want to look over the fact that you went to Harvard, undergrad, business, and law school. Just casually mention that, right? Take me back to how that ended up being. Like, did you always know you wanted to go to business school or be a lawyer? How did you end up in Harvard in the first place? And what was that like, especially being Latino, right? In Harvard, like that must have been something. I usually find, like in my industry, when I go to a conference for financial planning, I'm usually one of the very few, sometimes the only one in the room. It's gotten a little better, but I could only imagine what that must have been like for you, right? Just I would think it's something similar where there weren't too many Latinos running around, right? Or maybe I'm wrong, but fill us in and let us know what that was like.
No. Unfortunately, you're not wrong. I mean, Harvard does a great job of really putting together a diverse class in many ways, in terms of socioeconomic background, cultural background, areas of interest and focus and experience, and so they do a really great job. But I think the fact is that at a societal level, in higher education, in management positions, even in terms of CEOs and boardrooms, the Hispanic community is still unfortunately underrepresented, and that is. I place no fault on any of those individual organizations. I don't think there is any sort of institutional bias in most cases that leads to that. I think really it is a factor of the unique challenges that face the Hispanic community as coming from, in often cases, an immigrant background and having language issues. And it's something where, you look at the historical context of what leads someone to become an immigrant, and it's because they don't have access to economic opportunities in their home country. And so you look at the types of jobs that they get when they arrive here, and it's just challenging. It's a long process. It's a multi-generational process to get your family and your children to the point where they're able to afford an education and have access to those types of educational and professional opportunities. And so it's something that I think a lot of schools and a lot of organizations really do great work at improving. It's something that begins with education, something that we as a company and as a team feel really strongly about contributing towards in any way that we can. But yeah, it's at the end of the day, there still aren't that many Hispanics in these higher education places and in professional management positions. But that's I think why podcasts like yours and hopefully companies like ours are so important, because they're improving that access to information that can result in somebody, maybe they save a little bit more money here, a little bit more money there, and they can put more money towards their student loan payments and go to a better school. That's kind of the goal and the mission of at least a big part of what we try to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the way I feel about it as well. I don't have the chance to work with everyone one-on-one. So giving as much information as possible and having people like yourself on that have shown to create success, like you saw a problem and you just went out there and went at it yourself, right? Like, I'm just going to figure this out, which is amazing, right? What were some of the most influential people in your life as you were going through school and your career path and starting a business? I'm sure you hit so many challenges as well.
Yeah, definitely family. My parents, grandparents. So I'll start with my grandpa. This was my dad's dad. He was a cop in East LA. They put him in the Hollenbeck division because he spoke Spanish, and that was East LA, a portion of the city that everybody spoke Spanish. They needed all the Spanish-speaking cops over there. The memories I have of him were, he started as a beat cop, right? He was walking the beat. He was out there just on the streets, and he eventually worked his way up to detective. He was in the narcotics division, and so he was going undercover and doing really cool stuff, I thought. And so he eventually retired, and he started a security company. That's what he knew. He had been a cop, and so he knew security and started a security company. That security company is still around today. So he was an entrepreneur, and I think having that entrepreneurial spirit in the family really influenced me to want to start my own company. My dad did the same thing. He saw that there wasn't a lot of Spanish language media available in the country. This was back in the 80s and 90s, and now you have Telemundo, you have Univision, you have all these. I think you have Fox en Español, Fox Deportes, all that. That didn't exist back in the day. And so if you wanted to watch TV in Spanish, good luck. Go to Mexico. That's where you had to go find it. And so he did the same thing and ended up working at Telemundo and running a company that focused on Spanish language television. So seeing that kind of now not just entrepreneurship, but also entrepreneurship that had a positive impact on our community was really influential for me. My mom did the same thing. She put herself through college and law school because she started a little store. She started a frozen yogurt shop, and that paid her way through college, paid her way through law school. And so seeing this type of, and she went on to do really amazing things in business and politics, and has really been an inspiration for me. So being around these people who are just role models in terms of how they dedicate their lives to the community and to professional development and helping others. It's really been influential for me, and it's given me a great set of role models to shape my own professional and personal pursuits after.
Yeah, I really love that. I think that when we talk about like generational wealth, there's a lot more to it than money. And what you're describing, those values that you saw in them, how they translated into then you pursuing your own path and also like trailblazing in your own way, right? Because you saw how they did it when something maybe didn't even exist and they created it, right? So it's so important for us to, if we want to, when I look at the Hispanic population, we're probably the biggest group as far as like opening businesses, right? But then I feel like there's a disconnect as well, because then when you look at things like 401k contributions or balances, the rates of home ownership and things like that, right? They don't match, right? So like to some degree, we're opening businesses, but in another way, we're also not keeping up just even earning capacity, right? When you look at the counterparts, compare it to wise, I think the worst ones right now that if you look at it from backgrounds, like Black females do like they get the least paid, right, per hour compared to like the white male counterpart with the same degree, same job, right? We're somewhere somewhat better, but still definitely not keeping up, right? So it's very interesting to me how that plays out. And I think, it starts at home for sure. Obviously there's some institutional stuff that has to change, but I love how you had those role models that were influential to you that basically put that fire under you, right? To have that passion for what you do now. That's amazing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And honestly, if I hadn't gotten out there, gotten off the couch and done something, I probably would have gotten into even more trouble back home. So it was a little bit of a carrot, a little bit of a stick.
For sure. Yeah. And I saw on your LinkedIn, you mentioned that you were a summer associate at Starwood Capital. They're based out of London. Were you in London doing this, or was that like, I don't know if remote was the thing at the time?
No, this is pre-pandemic, so it wasn't remote. Yeah, I was based out of London, so I've been lucky in my career to work in a lot of different countries. The job I had right out of college, I was across Latin America and the Caribbean, probably traveling 3 weeks a month. So I was working in Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, Argentina, the Bahamas, even. Although it sounds more glamorous than it was, I think I was there probably once every 2 months for 2 years, and I went to the beach once. The rest of the time was in the conference room. And then, when I was in grad school, so this is when I was doing the JD MBA at Harvard, I had 3 summers. And every summer I wanted to try to do a different job because I wanted to test out different industries, learn as much as I could. And so I spent one summer at a big law firm in New York, private equity M&A group. I spent another summer doing investment banking at Goldman Sachs in New York. And then I spent another summer at Starwood Capital, which is a private equity firm based out of London. All really great experiences. And I think the experience of having worked in London was really interesting because I think most of that summer I was actually working on a deal out of Spain. The company it's a company that does a lot of work in real estate. They do a lot of acquisitions, and so they were looking at something in that market, and so I had to go there. And there was just another country that you got to understand for how they do business. Every country is different. Some business is done in a conference room, some business is done in a restaurant, some business is done in the gym. Who knows, right? Everywhere is different, and I think that's been one of the beauties about getting to work across borders, and then take that back here and try to apply the lessons I've learned into building a successful company.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's quite the wealth of experience there. And I think it speaks to, I love how you were intentional about exposing yourself to different experiences. I think that's something that's very valuable that a lot of us should definitely model, in our career paths. Like there's not one particular way to get to success. And sometimes you don't even know what your trajectory is going to look like until you expose yourself to these different types of jobs, talking to different people from different backgrounds as well, looking at mentors that are not like you, I think you gain knowledge and perspective from other people, so it sounds like you have like a very wide wealth of knowledge and exposure, so that's amazing. That's pretty cool.
I appreciate that. There's a writer that I really like. Is a guy named Scott Adams. He actually was the author of the Dilbert comics, and he's kind of a political pundit and an author now. And he describes one of his tricks for success as building a talent stack. So don't try to just learn things. Don't try to just focus on one area, but build a talent stack. And if you build a talent stack, and those can be all sorts of different talents, right? It can be accounting, it can be finance, it can be law, it can be different languages, whatever. If you build a talent stack, then regardless of what challenges are thrown your way or what professional environment you find yourself in, you will be able to apply those talents and those skills to that situation to produce a positive result. And that's something that's really stuck with me. And so, as you mentioned, I've now spent time in law firms, I've spent time in banks, I've spent time in financial firms. You've had, I think, a very similar wealth of varied and diverse experiences. And so I think the goal now is, regardless of the professional context or even the personal context, honestly, you can build a set of talents, set of skills that will be applicable in any problem situation or opportunity situation you might face.
Yeah, absolutely. No, very well said. I love it, man. Thank you. This has been amazing. I wanted to ask a couple of fun questions as well.
Let's do it.
So we'll do a couple of rapid fire questions. So favorite Latin cuisine or dish?
Oh, when I was in 6th grade, I had an AOL Instant Messenger screen name that was the Enchilada Man. And that was because I loved enchiladas then. I love enchiladas now. So you give me a good chicken enchilada, I'm done.
Nice. What about favorite music or artist?
Ooh, favorite artist. I'm a big classic rock guy, big jazz guy. I'd probably have to say Led Zeppelin.
Wow. Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. And then the last question, this one is basically picture yourself in an elevator. I think you're in New York City right now, right? So you're going to be, a stranger comes into the elevator. You're going to be with them for a short ride, right? They'll never see you again. They don't know about Crediverso or My Pocket Lawyer. What is something that you would leave them with? Any knowledge, any personal anecdote, any tips for success, anything that you've learned that you just like to share? Say, hey, listen, if I never see you again, these are some things or a thing that I would love to share with you that I've learned in my life.
That short amount of time, I think you can try to give them some sort of financial tips or knowledge, something like that. But I think the best thing I could do probably is try to leave them with a little bit of joy for their day, maybe tell them a joke, something like that. I get myself into trouble telling too many jokes, but I think it's the greatest extent that you can share happiness with the people around you, you're definitely going to make the world a better place.
I like that. And, I think it can then compound like interest, right? Because you might change that person's day by something nice or funny you say, and then they might be in a better mood and just keep it going, right? So I love that.
That's right. And so I can't take credit for that one. That is one that I've learned from someone very important to me. Actually, part of the reason, at least why we were having some difficulty scheduling this podcast, is that I spent the last week doing something very important. Prior to that week, I had a girlfriend, and now I have a fiance. And she is the one who shared that piece of advice with me to always try to bring joy to the people around you.
Well, felicidades, man. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
That's awesome. Well, great. Yeah, I'm glad that she shared that with you. I wanted to ask you what's next. It seems to me like you're just getting started, right? So what's in the vision, man?
Yeah, well, I think it's been an interesting evolution here because we started with identifying one group, one community that needed help, needed more resources, needed more information, more education, and we tried to solve some of those problems for them. Over the course of doing so, we realized that we could actually build something that would be helpful to a much broader community beyond the one that we had really begun with. So I think we are going to continue down that road. I'm really excited about what My Pocket Lawyer can do. We've actually built it in a way that's starting just with contracts, but we think we can take it far beyond that and give legal information in a way that helps people. And we're not a law firm. We're not giving legal advice, but puts people in a position to answer some of those legal questions themselves in a way that goes far beyond just dealing with the standard contracts you have to deal with. And so I'm excited to explore what we can do there. I think the legal system right now is rigged against folks who can't afford to pay a lawyer. And we are hopefully remediating some of that by creating a broader access. So I'm really excited with what we can do in the field of law. I mean, I got into being a lawyer for those reasons. And now this is the way that we can share that access using the medium of the internet that's just has huge scalability and reach in a very positive way.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, if people want to learn more, again, if you don't mind telling us the website or any social media links you'd like to share as well, we'll put them in the show notes. So be sure to check out the show notes for the direct links to those. But for those listening in the meantime.
Yep, it's mypocketlawyer.ai. You can find us on social media at mypocketlawyer also. I think that's on Instagram and Facebook, as well as crediverso.com and Crediverso on Instagram and Facebook.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Carlos. This has been amazing. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your story with us, your trajectory and your wisdom, man. And I'm super excited for what you've created. And I look forward to see what else you come up with as you continue to enhance the platform. I'm sure you're going to continue to have plenty of impact in not only the Latino community, just in the population in general. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. And same to you. I think this is we need more people like you in the world. We need more people doing the things you're doing. And so I was just very happy to be able to be a small part of this today.
Thank you. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Stay tuned for more amazing guests for the remainder of Hispanic Heritage Month and beyond. As always, if you have any questions, send me an email, luis@onmywaytowealth.com, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to On My Way to Wealth. If you have any questions, please send me an email at luis@onmywaytowealth.com. The information provided here is for information and education purposes only. The opinions expressed herein are solely those of myself, unless otherwise specifically cited. Material presented is believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations are made by my firm or myself about other parties' information or accuracy or completeness. All information or ideas provided should be discussed in detail with a financial advisor, accountant, or legal counsel prior to implementation. Thank you.